My name is Fizza. I'm the creative writer representative for Rotman Commerce, Entertainment, and Media. I'm joined by Avigaeil, who's our amazing president, as well as Andy. He's our TV show representative. And we are very, very happy to have you here today. So we wanted to ask, first off, how did your passion for acting come about?
You know, it started really very young. I was a punk kid in primary school, and for reasons I don't quite understand, teachers would put me into plays and I'd reluctantly go, feeling very awkward and embarrassed. And then as we got through into later primary school, grades 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, started doing a lot more of it. And it was a lot more fun. And the school I went to had some in-house stuff. We also did some competitions outside the school. There was a thing at the time called the Simpson Sears Drama Festival. And so high schools around the province would compete. And that was kind of cool. And so when it finally came time to graduate high school and pick the next step, I was looking at universities and thought, I'm not really sure what I want to study. I applied to some. I thought maybe I'd be a middling teacher. But I had no passion for anything at the moment except for acting. And I also auditioned for the National Theatre School in Montreal. I got in there and I went there.
How was your experience there in general?
Well, you know, it's a mixed bag always, because you're trying to do, it's a craft, basically, acting, right? So you're learning how to build a house. You use the hammers, use the nails, use the wood. This is how we do it. And so it was a very intense 3 years in Montreal in the mid to late 70s. So it was a while ago. Interestingly enough, a very political period in Quebec. And the National Theatre School is also l'École nationale du théâtre. So there's split English and French. Sometimes we would take courses together, like ballet or things like that. And then there was all this fraught political stuff outside of it, which gave drama a whole new meaning. So it was a very interesting time to be there.
What was your first acting project and how did you get this opportunity?
Of course, as I said, I've been working through school professionally. The first job I got was while I was still in theater school, which was sort of verboten. You weren't meant to do that, but I had a summer there, and somebody offered me a job in a show, and I took it. Then the most impressive one was slightly before I graduated. I went to the National Arts Centre in Ottawa, which is not too far from Montreal, and started filling in a bunch of parts in a production of Henry V that they were doing there. And that was a real stepping stone to other things.
That's very impressive. How do you think acting and film or TV in general has evolved over time? Do you think it's a good change, or would you rather some things were brought back?
I don't know what it is we've lost that might be brought back. I can tell you that for all disciplines, theater, film, and television, and now, of course, internet platforms, everything has become way more competitive. When I graduated theater school, there were 3 theater schools in the country and 70 professional theaters, give or take. Now, there are 70 theater schools and 3 reasonably well-paid big professional theaters. And so in inverse proportion, the world has got very strange and way more competitive. And so it's rather a more difficult career now than it was when I started. And therefore people are relying on their own recognizance a good deal more. They're creating their own work. They're becoming artistic directors of their own theater companies and learning to operate in a very more limited capacity rather than the big institutions we were used to graduating way back then.
Describe your process of preparing for a role and what type of acting do you find is most effective?
I would say at this, late stage of my career as a very old person, I would say that the simplest is the best. And it takes decades to learn how to be simple. Because, keep in mind what we're trying to do. We're trying to convince someone that we are someone we are clearly not. So it's lying for money. And you You need to know why you're doing it and not to embellish it with all of those other things that are part of why you want to become an actor. I dream of fame and fortune and on red carpets and all that. That's nothing to do with acting and only a distraction to the actual work. So when you're doing the actual work, and I have a very strong foundation in the classical theater, that is to say, Shakespeare, Moliere, Eugene O'Neill, Chekhov, those kinds of people. I know how to work very specifically on detailed and difficult text and figure out what the author's intention is, because that's my obligation, is to fulfill that, their intention, discover what it is, and then bring it to life. The same is true in television and film. And so I work essentially exactly the same. I pay the same kind of concentrated attention to the author's intention and the kind of material that they're offering me. So what are the words? What are they? What's the situation? Who are these people? What are they trying to say with this circumstance and this setting and these characters and their interactions? And so I find it's pretty much the same all the way across the board. And for me, very specifically, it involves writing everything out by hand. So I take, even if it's Shakespeare and I'm playing King Lear, I get a big sheet of foolscap and I start at the beginning of the play and I write the whole thing out. The same is true of a television script or a film script. And part of what that does, we have a lot more time to rehearse Shakespeare or plays, 3, 4, 5 weeks, where for cinema and television, very often it's, oh, we're married. Hi, nice to meet you. Oh, and we're starting with the scene in bed. Great. How long have we been married? I mean, it's shocking how little time, how little connection, how little you get. You're supposed to have done all that work at home on your own and then leap into it. It's very hard to do. Some people are very, very good at it. I find it's better to rehearse and to practice. So I do a lot of that at home, starting by writing everything out. And what that does is it allows me to take ownership of the author's words, right? So it's my character's words, because in the mnemonic exercise of actually writing those words out, I've taken a kind of ownership. If I can write to be or not to be, that is the question, right? Whether 'tis nobler in the mind, then when I go to play it, I have an immediate memory of having invented those words, even though they're not mine. So while I'm pretending to pick them out of the air randomly and absolutely spontaneously, there's a foundation of solid thinking and review that's taken place before.
You are a member of the acting company of Stratford Festival of Canada, which I find is very impressive in itself. How was your experience when you first joined, and who would you recommend this opportunity to?
Yeah, I am on and off a member of the Stratford company. I certainly started here very young in the 80s, 80, 81, sometime around there. And I've done many, many, many seasons, and been very lucky. I've done all the great parts. There's very few left. Some I've done twice. And I started really, hit the ground running. It was a very tough year, 1981. There'd been a lot of upheaval in artistic directorships. So a lot of people were coming or going. People were getting parts they didn't deserve. I was certainly guilty of that, playing all kinds of big things, small things, other things, and just leapt into it and started, and just did it. And got a lot of it really horribly wrong. But there were also at the time a lot of very sympathetic senior players, people with an enormous amount of experience, who said, listen, hey, come here, let me buy you a drink. Let me tell you how this actually works. What you're doing here is enthusiastic, it's energetic, it's just wrong. So let me help you be more right. And so over the years, it was very, very useful to commit to Stratford for a little bit. And I did. I stayed for a few years, because I think you need to invest look at what you guys are doing at school, right? You need 2 or 3 years to figure out, is this something I want to do? Is it something that's not paying me back? It doesn't interest me, but I need a year or so to figure out that it doesn't interest me, right? I need to try it. I can't just dismiss it out of hand. And so one of the great advantages to Stratford is it's a very welcoming environment. The repertory company means you can do not one, not two, sometimes 3 or 4 different shows. I've done as many as 5 in the same season, all at the same time, all in repertory. So you get an enormous amount of exercise intellectually, emotionally, rigorously in terms of the literature of plays and playwrights. And you get a pretty good idea whether it's for you or not. So what I would say to anybody who is thinking of getting into the theater, if you're interested in a classical foundation, and sidebar, I would think that you should be, because it's a foundation for everything else you're going to do in your life, including television and film and radio and books on tape and anything you might want to do. But if you're thinking of doing that, these kinds of places, that is to say the Shaw Festival and the Stratford Festival, are enormously useful, because if you give them a bit of your time, they will give you endless opportunities. They give you all kind of perks. There are bonuses to being in an enormously well-developed and funded, even COVID notwithstanding, organization that can provide you with extra classes, voice classes, movement classes, fight classes, dance classes, body awareness, all kinds of things to continue your professional development. So I would say to anybody who is interested in that journey, this is a very good place to start.
Do you go back often, or?
I go back as often as I can, and as long as there's a good part. I'd been here last in 2014 doing King Lear, and then I was asked to come back last year in 2020. I come back as a way of recharging batteries. I won't be coy with you. The Umbrella Academy is a marvelous show with fabulous people, but it's not Hamlet, and it's not King Lear, and it's not Richard III, as well written as it is. It's just a different experience. And because I'm a kind of actor who's been very, very lucky, very, very fortunate to have done basically all kinds of everything in a long career, I recognize that every now and again, you need to make sure you can do the really hard stuff, because anything worth doing is going to be hard.
What do you think is the best way to kickstart a career in acting for someone who probably didn't get involved so early on?
Well, I think when you say early on, that's the very best idea. The earlier you can start, the better. The more training and help and guidance you can get, the better. Obviously it's a confidence game. And I mean that it's a con game. You go into a room pretending that you feel absolutely confident, the words, the lines, the part, you're going to get that job, even though you just left a room full of 20 people who look pretty much exactly like you, with way longer resumes, way more famous. You think, this is hopeless. I'm never going to get this. And yet you have to be confident. You have to work yourself up to it. You got to believe in yourself. If you come in ridiculously well prepared, one of the things it gives you is great flexibility. So if someone says to you, hey, that was terrific, can you try it like this? You think, yeah, sure, I can. I know the musical notes. I know what I'm here to play, and I can play it differently. And so that I've found over the course of well over 44 years of doing this, that is the thing that gives you the most security. So I would really encourage people to be very well prepared and to decide fundamentally about this as a career choice. And really examine their motivation. Is this something you really, really, really want to do? And if so, only do it if you cannot not do it.
In 2002, you had the opportunity to play former Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau in a miniseries. How did you prepare for the role in order to give a truly authentic performance?
I had some success previously playing another Canadian icon, Glenn Gould, in a wonderful art film called 32 Short Films About Glenn Gould. So I had some experience in, finding how to do Canadian icons. And one of the things I discovered with Gould, because there were 32 short films, and the brilliant director François Girard was asking for different levels of Gould in the different films, I decided that the best way to approach it was to create a palette of possibilities, a kind of a slider from 1 to 10 for both vocal performance and physical performance. And so I could say to him, in this particular film, do you want a 7 on the physical scale and a 9 on the vocal scale in terms of impression? And I worked on impersonating Gould until I got good enough at that so that I could get rid of just doing an imitation of him and get to something like an evocation of him. So it wouldn't be just him exactly, it would be overtones and undertones, whispers of, it would create the sense of him. And I know that we succeeded in this because of the many, many people I spoke to after the film. So many of them said, my God, you really got it. But they never mentioned the same moment. And so in that instant, I realized that our perception of other people is colored entirely by our individual experience of them. Now that absolves me of any, obligation to be in any way definitive. This is Gould, this is Trudeau. So what I did then when we moved to Trudeau is I did the same groundwork, the same text work, the same video and sonic work, and then went to the director and say, dial up, dial down. And the one thing I did do was I was invited to meet with his family because Trudeau was alas dead, just freshly dead when I did it. And so he was not able to be met. But I was asked if I would like to meet his family, Justin, who was not prime minister at the time, his mom and others, through an intermediary. And I declined. And the reason I declined was that I did not want their truth to interfere with my fiction, right? Because they had an experience of the man that was very intimate and very connected. And as an actor, I would have been obviously very empathetic, very sympathetic to their point of view. And that would have poisoned my job in representing their husband or father, as I had to do based on the script I had.
As you mentioned earlier, you were part of the Umbrella Academy as Sir Reginald. If you had to describe your character in 3 to 5 words, what would you say?
World's greatest dad. He only wants the best for his children. He wants them to live up to their potential. And occasionally the obstacles to their potential is themselves. And so sometimes he has to create hurdles or examples or challenges that allow them to meet their potential. And sometimes that can involve a certain harshness and a certain unrelenting unwillingness to accept failure as an option. But in the end, they save the world and possibly the universe.
You've been in not 1, but 2 movies for Marvel, which, like, all of us are very big fans of Marvel. How was it like working on set?
I was very, very grateful to be cast in the first one. I did Thor for Sir Kenneth Branagh. So he's a terrific guy to work with. And he asked me along because he knew me and he knew that I had classical theater experience. And so I was asked along to do that one. And then what's the other one I did? Was it Spider-Man? Directed by Mark Webb, if you can believe it. They are so secretive. They have different names. They're all coded. They are hyper protective. When I was dressed for Thor and ready to go, I was put into a black cloak, put into a black draped golf cart, ushered into that and driven to another studio, and then undraped. I got to work and then did the reverse. At which point, when we were finished our day, the costume, which was just basically appliqué, all by hand, by 4 Oscar winners, brilliant stuff, took 5.5 hours to do, 2 hours plus to take off. And then they shredded it. They were so worried about anybody finding a piece of King Laufey, the frost giant, Blue King, that they then took this pile of goo that had been stuck all over me and put it through some shredding machine. And when I asked, why am I being put in a black bag and driven 8 feet? Photographers in helicopters. I said, guys, are you serious? You don't honestly think anybody wants to see me in a blue suit with red eyes with a helicopter? They don't. Yes, they do. And so it was crazy.
When Marvel actors say that Marvel is very secretive, you can actually vouch for that.
Oh, no, no question. And listen, keep in mind, so for Spider-Man, the 2 lead guys, Andrew Garfield and Dane DeHaan, who was playing the Goblin, Peter Jackson, who did Lord of the Rings, his sci-fi high-tech computer-generated shop he just sold for billions of dollars, did Planet of the Apes, et cetera, et cetera. So his people built a lot of the outfits, right? So once you put Dane or Andrew into these, $1 million outfits, you're going to be shooting for 6 months. So now Dane and Andrew are told how they have to live. And how they have to live: here's your trainer, here's your box of food, here's your lunch, here's your dinner. It's this many calories. You can't get fat. You can't get any bigger than we want you to get big, because that's the way this stainless steel suit that we built for you by hand fits. It's a serious commitment to doing the stuff properly.
Do you have any insider secrets you could share with us, just when you were working in Thor or on set for Spider-Man? Anything you could share at all without.
Well, I've told you about their lunches, yeah. Right? Yeah. And listen, when we were doing Thor, I was very fortunate because Tony and I had worked together years before. I played his little brother in a marvelous Shakespeare film called Titus for Julie Taymor. And so we spent 6 months in Rome together. So when we come to do Thor, and along comes Kenneth Branagh, a classical actor and director and producer who knows Shakespeare, he says, okay, I got these great Shakespearean actors, Tony and Colm. I don't have any time to direct them much. We've got 250 people standing around. We've got huge, big cameras and lights. We've got to get this done. But I need it to be something big. I need to be able to communicate with these guys about what I need here. And so what he did was he simply spoke to us in Shakespeare. He had spent 2 years rewriting the script so that it was more like a classical experience. That is to say, like a Shakespearean tragedy. So Tony is playing King Lear. I'm playing one of the evil Iago geniuses who's trying to undo everybody's world. And that was enormously fun because you thought, okay, even on these huge movies, we don't have a lot of time. It seems like you should have, but because there's so much to accomplish and we have to move so quickly, there were some other rather striking things that happened. And one is sort of dangerous, but it speaks to Ken's resolve. Just before we were to go to camera, an actor who shall remain nameless was let go. And he had done a month of fight rehearsals and work, but he had behaved badly and he had been unprofessional and he had been late for cinematography meetings and camera tests and things that are essential to our moving forward. Ken and I were going to dinner the night before we started shooting. And he said, I just have to keep you up to date here. I'm making a change. And the studio is behind me. And the next day, someone else was there. I was in awe of the responsibility that he took and how it worked out. And indeed, it worked out very, very well. He was absolutely right. But it was a huge crisis from the point of view of a show about to start. And yet the studio believed in him and believed in what he was doing. Don't tell anybody.
Just one final question. You are in many notable films and TV series. If you had to choose one, which one would be your most memorable?
What I tend to do is I love the one I'm working with presently the most because I'm most focused on that. When you have the luxury of looking back, I would say that there are some watershed moments in the career. You know, in the classical theater, when I started to play parts like Romeo, Petruchio, Iago, Hamlet, Cassius, Macbeth, King Lear, Coriolanus, all the title parts. Those are enormous because they are absolutely foundational for your growth and development. And once you've done that, you can look back with great affection at what you learned from all of them. As far as cinema and television goes, Gould, Trudeau, Bon Cop, Bad Cop 1 and 2, because they're bilingual films. And those other Canadian icon things are enormously important to me because they play to my home. I would say movies like Titus, I mentioned with Sir Tony and Jessica Lange and Alan Cumming, are brilliant things. The Insider I did with Al Pacino and Russell Crowe for Michael Mann. I worked for so many great people. Changeling for Clint Eastwood with Angelina Jolie. John Woo, Face Off. Have you ever seen Face Off with John Travolta and Nick Cage? I'm the doctor who takes their faces off. And then 20 minutes later, I show up in another movie for John Woo called Paycheck with Ben Affleck, my third Ben Affleck picture after the Jack Ryan For All Mankind and Pearl Harbor. You know, as an actor, a working actor, we have to keep showing up. And I would have to say, finally, that the legacy for me is not picking a favorite, but being able to put the words working and actor into the same sentence for over 40 years. And I'm very proud of that.
We'd like to thank you so much for taking time out of your day to just speak with us. It's much, much appreciated. Have a great day.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your interest. I hope it's of some use to you, and that you guys have great success with whatever career you choose to do. But as I say, don't do it unless you absolutely love it.